Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to Dead Duck Film Club. It's Seb. I'm here with Joshua Clover, who is the author of The Matrix, which is a part of the BFI Classics, I believe. And yeah, I'm really happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me along.
So I guess I'll just get started. Can you tell us a bit more about your book and what made you want to write about The Matrix and its themes?
Never an easy question to figure out why you wrote a whole book about something. But um, certainly, I remember when I walked out of the movie, I saw it with a group of friends opening week. And my group of friends, probably like many of you, we like to walk out of a movie and spend about an hour talking about why it was absolute rubbish. And we walked out and did not have that conversation, interestingly enough. We were all pretty excited. We weren't sure why, but we knew there was something there. So that was the first impulse. But there's a couple more that sort of led me to want to engage with it more seriously. One is at that time in my life, and I think this is not unfamiliar, I was pretty obsessed with the Situationist International, and particularly with Guy Debord and the Society of the Spectacle. Cult classic book, right? And I registered the movie or some parts of the movie as just being sort of chunks of that book with the word spectacle struck out and Matrix written in instead. And I thought that was not cheap, but fascinating as a choice. And then there's this third element, I would say, in addition to being excited and the Society of the Spectacle, which is, all science fiction movies have that characteristic of they're set in the future, but they're somehow an expression of our present, right? Whatever present you're in when you see the movie. And in this case, there's this really interesting inversion where within the movie, their imagined present is actually a sort of expression of the actual future. The movie's reality is set in 2199, and the imagined sort of spectacular version, the cinema version, is set in 1999, 200 years before. So that inversion of how science fiction usually works, expressing the future rather than the past, I found quite interesting and generative. So that was enough to get me going and interested in saying more than our hour-long conversation after that first night.
Cool. You describe the Matrix as a zeitgeist statement, sorry, of the late 1990s. And now we're watching it 25 years later. Do you still think it speaks to today's world, or has its meaning shifted since the 2000s?
So two things. One, I think something fundamental about the movie stays the same for me. For me, the movie, among other things, but at a sort of baseline, registers what I call the dream life of the boom, meaning the early tech boom and sort of an imagined life for people who are essentially data entry people, coders, whatever, working at desks in tech startups, and this sort of could be a fantasy for them. And certainly that question of the mass worker doing clerical tech work has continued, mutated, remains with us. So in that sense, I think still very much a movie of the present. On the other hand, there have been some interesting changes. And for example, the sisters Wachowski now sort of have an account of the trilogy as, among other things, really exploring issues of transness and, moreover, clearly politics around trans people have become a flashpoint in current social struggles over social hierarchy, possible transformation. And so I want to take that dimension, even though it's not what I sort of battened onto, very seriously as a new way to think about the movie that I want to leave open for people.
Right. Yeah. There's a part at the end of the movie. So I rewatched it recently, and at the end, Neo says, "I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin." And it had me thinking about back in those days. I guess technology was still a big a scare. There was the big the 2000 crash. People said that at New Year's everything would crash to everything. So, and I guess now 25 years later, we're seeing how technology has evolved, and it feels like Neo kicked it off in a way. Does that reflect also what you were thinking?
I think that's right. Although, and I suspect this won't be the last time I make this point, I don't want to overvalue technology itself. I think, I'm not sure how things look from the UK, but I think in the US, it's particularly clear that as much as we talk about AI and replacing jobs, and these are real concerns, but I think the real concern is not technology, it's corporations that have power over technology and can use that power to organize and control society. And I'm not worried about the tech itself. I'm worried about the power of the companies that have control over the tech and have an interest in making use of that tech.
There are so many famous moments in the Matrix. I think the fights, the kung fu with Morpheus, like a lot of that. I know kung fu is one of my favorite lines. From
Ah,
from bullet time to Morpheus's red pill. That's also something that's permeated today. Red pill, blue pill. From your perspective as a writer and a scholar, is there a moment in the film you think deserves more attention, or is there a moment that you particularly enjoy in the movie?
well, I want to name a couple. One is one that I focus on in the book, which is that scene where Cypher is just reading code that, which is always, appears in the movie as green vertical scrolling numbers and letters. Um, is just sort of reading code, but seeing reality immediately through it. Because I don't even see the code anymore. I just see blonde, brunette, redhead, and she points at three different screens. And I think that experience of in which we all now, or not all of us, but many of us are so familiar with the world of code, whether we're gamers or whether it's part of our job or whether we just use a computer interface all the time. We're so familiar with code standing between us and what we imagine to be reality that we stop seeing it. We stop recognizing that our lives are mediated by that. And that remains to me a sort of accurate assessment of ways that our own sort of physical relation to reality has changed somewhat. So I do want to sort of hold on to that moment. But in rewatching it the other night, 2 nights ago, I think, I was actually really struck by a moment I hadn't thought much about in the original, where there's the brief narration that Morpheus gives of the big war between the humans and the machines, which the machines win. And the humans' great stratagem is to make the sky go dark to blot out the sun, because at that moment the machines are solar powered. And the idea is, well, you cut them off from solar power, it doesn't work in the end because they find this workaround, which is to get energy from human bodies themselves. But that idea that humans will save themselves by darkening the sky and blotting out the sun is, of course, with us in actuality today. It's one of the proposed solutions for global warming, right? Is to release various chemicals into the atmosphere that will change the ability of the sun to project, solar power to the surface of the Earth to slow down the melting of the polar caps and so on. So this sort of quite interesting fantasy battle in the science fiction movie, the pro tem solution or sort of stratagem in that battle now exists for us as a real, actual, proposed, but still somehow science fictional solution to the single greatest problem that we actually face, not in movies. And I find that pretty remarkable. Coincidence or not, pretty remarkable.
That's actually terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
You compare in your book The Matrix to other edge of construct films. There's quite a few comparison to other films, or as I call them, simulation films, like The Truman Show and Dark City, which is also actually a great movie.
Great movie.
What makes The Matrix stand out from that wave of movies about fake realities? And I'd like to add to that, why do we remember The Matrix more than we remember other movies about fake realities?
It may be that The Matrix stands out not because it's different from those movies, but because it's the best version of them. That is to say, The Matrix is not only itself, but it can represent that whole category for us. So we feel, standing behind The Matrix, all those movies and all that sort of intellectual, emotional concern about that danger that we'll be overwhelmed by some kind of simulated reality that we don't know is what it is. Uh, so it may be that the Matrix stands out less because it is unique, but because it's sort of a paradigm for a genre of movie. But there's other things to say too, right? I like a lot of those movies. As you mentioned, Dark City is a terrific movie. I like The Truman Show as well. I like The 13th Floor, which is a remake of an earlier movie, and various other versions. But none of them have the kind of kick-ass action that the Matrix has. Those, I mean, we can talk all day, and I'm a professional scholar, and I can say fancy things, but the fight scenes in the Matrix are incredible, and those other movies don't have that. The helicopter escape scene, just in terms of the history of movies, it's obviously drawing on a whole series from the Tales of Pauline to any number of other sort of serial thriller films, and it's just an incredible, astonishing version of that movie. And the other films don't. They're interesting, they're thoughtful, but they don't have that the action sequences that I think, among other things, really set the Matrix apart.
I have one last question for you. How likely is it, in your opinion, that we currently live in a simulation like the Matrix?
Oh, God, I've never been asked this question before. This is my big chance. I'm going to say 100%, which is to say, anything you can't disprove, I think you have to accept as likely. So I'm going to say almost certainly. There's no way in a real world you and I could have a conversation across the vast ocean, across vast continents, talking about a movie that's 25 years old, unless we lived in a simulation. It's got to be.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, listen, that's all the questions. So I just want to say a huge, huge thank you, Joshua, for taking the time and spending time with us after watching the movie. And yeah, it's been great.
It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope everyone is enjoying themselves tonight.